The main proposition of the speech that I will be refuting tonight is that climate change produces 3 negative effects around the world. The 3 secondary claims of the proposition are that climate change causes unstable weather conditions, climate change causes natural reserves to diminish, and that climate change negatively affects the animal population. In response, during the first secondary claim, which is that climate change causes unstable weather conditions, the speaker does not give the definition of climate and weather, which are not the same thing. According to Brian Dunbar from NASA, climate refers to how the atmosphere behaves over a long period of time, while weather depends on the condition of the atmosphere over a short period of time. The speaker provides evidence from NASA stating that the average global temperature on Earth has increased by about 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880. They then go about comparing this to the human body by saying that the human body's average temperature is 99 degrees, and if the temperature were to be increased by 1.4 degrees, then our body would react in giving us a fever. However, up until this point, the speaker never mentions what the average temperature of the Earth actually is, nor do they mention whether a change of 1 degree would even affect the Earth. The speaker then goes about stating that temperatures in areas around the world continue to reach its highest. However, the only area that is mentioned is the South Pole, where the speaker's evidence from the South Pole Observatory states that the warmest temperature ever recorded at the South Pole was on December 25, 2011. They never then mention any more recent temperatures or mention any other areas around the world where temperatures have reached its highest points. Then the last piece of evidence for this claim is that according to the Union of Concerned Scientists, spring weather arrives 10 days earlier than it used to. This piece of evidence is irrelevant because first it says spring weather, which weather, as I defined it earlier, is only over a short period of time, so it is not considered a climate change, and it does not relate back to the main proposition that climate change produces 3 negative effects around the world, since they never mention whether spring arriving 3 days earlier actually has a negative effect around the world. In the speaker's secondary claim that climate change causes natural reserves to diminish, they start off by saying many living things on Earth cannot adapt to how quickly the Earth is changing. Therefore, many natural reserves and animals are diminishing. This statement itself has no connection to the main proposition or to the secondary claim that climate changes cause natural reserves to diminish, because how living things not being able to adapt to the Earth's changes had nothing to do with climate changes causing natural reserves to diminish. Then later, when the speaker provides evidence by Daniel Glick from National Geographic saying that Glacier Park in 1910 was home to an estimated 150 glaciers, since then the number has decreased to fewer than 30, and most of those remaining have shrunk in area by 2/3. Once again, the speaker fails to provide other examples of glaciers from other places around the world, and never does it say in the evidence that climate change is what is affecting these glaciers. The speaker's last secondary claim is that climate change negatively affects the animal population. Here, they state that according to All About Wildlife, where here she never states the year the article came out in, only 20,000 to 25,000 polar bears exist today. The speaker never mentions population numbers from other years, therefore the audience does not know whether 20,000 to 25,000 is an appropriate number of polar bears, or whether these numbers have increased or decreased in the recent years. Lastly, the speaker says that according to Endangered Species International, 16,928 known animals are listed as threatened with extinction. However, after thoroughly looking through this list, I came to find that very few animals are actually threatened as a result of climate change. Majority of the animals on the list are actually threatened as a result of urbanization, pollution of rivers and lakes, overfishing, diseases, introduction of new species, hunting, none of which these are connected to climate change. In conclusion, I feel that the speaker's secondary claims that climate change causes unstable weather conditions, climate change causes natural reserves to diminish, and that climate change negatively affects the animal population fails to support the main proposition that climate change produces 3 negative effects around the world. Thank you.
All right, all the structural stuff is fine. You moved to the first point pretty clearly. I like the idea that you're going to turn around this discussion of climate to weather, and you do use that later on when you're talking about the one piece of data from the Union of Concerned Scientists. I appreciated that. I thought that that does make the argument sound a little bit inconsistent. The argument that we don't know what the average temperature of the planet is or was supposed to be, I think, is a good argument, but there's no evidence and no reason to believe that there is, in fact, a normal temperature. It may, in fact, be that the argument that you want to be making here is that there isn't a particular temperature. So instead of arguing it's gone up, and you say, well, we don't know that it's gone up because we don't know those kinds of things, I think it would probably be easier for you to say, it varies. We go through, like everybody else, deny the analogy that's being drawn here and say the assumption of the human body has an average temperature. That part is true. We know that. What we have no information about that for the planet, and we have lots of information that suggests that the planet goes through a variety of cycles here. So there's no reason to believe that we're going to be endangered or the planet's endangered because it might simply be in one of those cycles. I think that would be maybe a better way to express that point. The South Pole challenge, basically you're challenging the evidence a little bit. You don't have any of your own data on that particular point. I like like I said, I like the turnaround that you had on the Union of Concerned Scientists stuff because they basically are using the same sort of thing with weather. And I thought that was a very valid question at the end. Where is the evidence that says that spring arriving early is problematic? Which is what the claim is, that it creates some kinds of problem, and you say there wasn't any demonstration that there's a problem, so that's a reasonable challenge. The movement to the second point was pretty clear. Again, you're challenging the relevance of the argument. I didn't think your explanation here was very clear. It seemed a little, it might look good on the page, and maybe it sounds good when you're reading it, and if I could read it 3 times myself, it might make sense, but we're back to one of those oral communication kinds of things. What is it that sentence says? I'm not sure. So you need to make those claims a little bit clearer. The challenge on Glacier Park, I think, is okay. The idea that there isn't any data from other places, again, it would be stronger if you had your own evidence on that, but that's a reasonable press to make. I'm not sure that you want to rely, though, just on a press on their evidence and not have any information of your own to validate those kinds of things. So that's a little bit problematic. And then we get to the argument about the animals, and basically we have the same argument about the polar bears that we were having about the planet. We don't know what the static number is or what the average number is. We don't know if we've gone up or down. And where's the proof that it's related to climate change? Now, you do have a claim that says of all those animals on the risk of extinction list, the endangered species list, that most of them are threatened by something else. And I know that you have information there, but you're not citing the source on that, and you're not telling, it doesn't sound like a direct quote. It sounds like it's a paraphrase of something that you read, and you want to have the direct quote and cite that to give your argument some credibility there. I thought you had a pretty clear summary, a little more reading than you want to have too. All right, thank you.